I know that Islam and other faiths reject homosexuality as a perversion. But how do you counter when you talk about the very nature? We all know people that are born as children. You see them acting feminine, they're boys.
Femininity.
They make no choice. They just from little kids, you can tell.
Femininity is not. There's nothing. It's not encouraged for a male. But a ma'boon is mentioned in the books of fiqh. A feminine person, somebody who acts effeminate, is mentioned that it's undesirable that he leads the prayer. But there's no moral stigma there. You're not saying that this person is bad or evil. When that person makes a choice to transgress boundary. Now, see, the thing is here, the idea of impulse. I don't know because I haven't been, that's not my experience of the world, right? I've been attracted to the opposite sex. That does not mean that I don't recognize a handsome man if I see them. I think it's natural for us to recognize beauty, right? There's an attraction to beautiful people, whether it's a male or a female. I think that's quite normal. From the Islamic perspective, if there is an impulse, then what is demanded of the individual is that they suppress that. So, from the Muslim point of view, if a person does have homosexual impulses or desires, which obviously there are people that have that, the Muslims would say that is the same as somebody having an impulse to steal. That they like something, they want it, and they desire to steal it. They have to say, no, I will not transgress the boundaries. That there are implications. And the implications, there's an idea within Western culture, modern Western culture, that as long as I don't harm anybody else, it's okay. From the Muslim point of view, there is a harm when it emerges into the public space. In other words, as far as the Muslims are concerned, what people do behind their closed doors is their own business. That is not my area of judgment. If I see an effeminate man, I should not assume that he's a homosexual by Islamic law. That's not my place. If somebody is openly doing these things, that is what becomes condemned. When there's an open breach. The same with alcohol. Somebody that makes wine in their house and drinks wine, that's between them and God. The minute they step out into the public space, then that is where the Sharia says no. Right? So in terms of Islamic law, what applies to them in this world is only what moves into the public space, not what's in the private space. But in terms of the next world, we believe that God takes people to account for the public and the private space. So that's really the way I think the Muslims would look at it. And the Prophet said that from my community there will be different types of homosexuality. He said there will be homosexuality of the glance, and homosexuality of touch, and then homosexuality of the action. It's in the hadith, yeah. And it's also considered one of the signs of the end of time and I'm going to talk about when we get to the end of time, with homosexuality and lesbianism become very prevalent according to the Prophet Muhammad. It is one of the signs of the end of time. And he actually said that men would marry men and women would marry women. That is in one of the hadiths. Now, in terms of are we predetermined to hell? Or are we predetermined? Which is obviously a question that your students are going to ask you. From the Muslim point of view, no one gets to paradise with their actions, but no one gets there without their actions. In other words, there is an idea that we cannot be grateful enough for the gift of life, for the gift of sight, speech, hearing, power, volition, all of these things. And therefore, anything that we do is still a shortcoming in relation to what we owe God. There is that idea. So there is definitely an idea, like in the Christian religion, of grace, that you are saved by grace. The Christians would see it as through the blood of Christ. The Muslims would see it as through the grace of God, right? By the rahmah, the mercy of God. But the Quran very clearly says, لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. Man, the human being, only has what they strive for. So you will see your actions. And your actions, you are taken to account for your actions. And this relates now to the last and final thing, which is the day of judgment. This is the 6th article of faith. Human beings are fully accountable for their actions. According to the Islamic tradition, there is a day in which all of the souls are resurrected. Now, also just to relate this in terms of where the accountability comes in. According to the Quranic view, human beings were brought into the presence of God, and God said, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And all of the souls answered in affirmation. And this is the proof. And so what happens in this world is the soul is to be reminded of this. It's the parent's challenge to remind the child until it becomes firmly rooted in them that God is their Lord and they should submit to God. If not, then prophets come and they tell people and they should submit to them. The day of judgment is a day when the debts fall due. That is how it's called in the Quran. Yawm ad-Din, the day the debts fall due. The day the debts... Yawm ad-Din. Yeah, it's very similar in the Hebrew, have that as well. Yawm ad-Din. The day the debts fall due. So there is an idea that we are going to be taken into account. Now the Prophet Muhammad said, Hasibu qabla an tuhasabu, take yourself to account before you are taken to account. So there is an idea that the human being can take themselves to account in this world. And is encouraged as a spiritual practice before you go to sleep to go through your day and to ask forgiveness for the wrongs you did and ask for acceptance for the rights you did. That is a highly encouraged spiritual practice within the Islamic tradition. And if one does that with perseverance and sincerity, then that is in a sense a lesser reckoning. It is a way of facilitating the day of judgment. Now there's an idea, I'll just go through the afterlife experience in the Islamic tradition, what happens here. The very first thing, there is a pre-worldly existence. And this is the existence of the spirits, the souls, before we came into this world. The next stage is the worldly existence. And this is called dunya. Now it's interesting, in the Arabic language, dunya in Arabic means the lowest. In other words, this is the lowest, we're at the lowest level. What is above us is hierarchy. The highest level is the presence of God. Dunya is the lowest level. This is the life of this world. In the Quran is called hayatud dunya. The root word of dunya is, one of the meanings is grapes, like the famous fox in Aesop's fables. The grapes are just out of reach. And that is the nature of this world. There is an element in this world that the soul will never be content as long as it is in this world. But it will attempt to satiate its desires through the world. This is, like in Hinduism, they have the idea of the sensual, or even Kierkegaard's system. The idea of the aesthete, the person who spends their life in sensual experiences. These are attempts at assuaging this turbulence within the human soul. From the Muslim point of view, this is futile. The soul will never be at peace as long as it is attempting to fill the vacuum or the emptiness through worldly experience. One of the things that I think is happening in this culture now is human beings have become very jaded in their experiences. There's a need for